Imagine standing on the edge of the world, an island so far from any continent that the horizon feels infinite, where the ocean meets the sky in perfect silence. And there, rising from the earth like sentinels of stone, hundreds of colossal faces gaze toward the heavens. They do not speak, they do not move, yet their presence carries a weight that defies time itself. This is Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, a speck of land adrift in the vast Pacific Ocean, surrounded by over 2,000 miles of water in every direction. Here stand nearly 1,000 moai, ancient monoliths carved from volcanic rock, some as tall as 10 meters, weighing more than 80 tons. Their eyes once shone with coral and obsidian, their faces serene, almost human, but not quite. They seem to watch, to remember, as if the island itself holds a memory the world has long forgotten. Who built them, and why? For centuries, explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers have come to this lonely island to ask that very question. But the answers, like the tides, shift with every generation. Some say the Moai are monuments to ancestors, others whisper that they mark the presence of gods. There are those who believe they are the work of visitors, not from another land, but from the stars. What is certain is that the Moai are not random. Each one stands with purpose, facing inland, as though guarding invisible cities or forgotten temples. Beneath their stone expressions lies a message carved in silence, a story stretching back to a time before writing, before memory, when humankind still spoke through stone and sky. The island itself seems to breathe mystery. Its winds carry voices that sound almost like chanting. Its cliffs echo the rhythm of waves that have sung the same song for thousands of years. Legends say the first people came from a distant land, paradise swallowed by the sea. Some called it Hiva, others the last remnant of Mu, the lost continent that once connected the world's ancient civilizations. Could Easter Island be a surviving fragment of that forgotten age? Or is it the work of a people who unlocked secrets that modern science has yet to rediscover? Beneath the stone faces, tunnels snake through the hills, and petroglyphs cover the rocks with symbols of birds, suns, and waves. They seem to tell of flight, migration, and rebirth, as if the Moai were part of something much larger than simple worship or memory. Each statue has its own character, its own energy. Some stand proudly in groups along the coast. Others lie half-buried, as though waiting to rise again. Their creators carved them from the volcanic heart of the island, a mountain called Rongorongo, where unfinished giants still sleep, their faces half-emerged from the stone, like dreams caught between worlds. To gaze into their eyes is to feel time slow down. Every ridge, every shadow carved by the sun, feels like a secret message left for those who dare to look deeper. The Moai do not simply exist, they communicate. Their silence is not emptiness, but a form of knowledge that transcends speech. And maybe that's the point, that the greatest truths are not written, but remembered by the earth itself. Easter Island, then, is more than a place. It is a question carved into stone, a question that has outlasted empires, languages, and centuries, a question that hums softly in the ocean breeze. Who were the true builders of these statues, and what sacred purpose guided their hands beneath the sun of Rapa Nui? When the first European sails appeared on the horizon, Easter Island had already lived 1,000 years of solitude. It was the morning of April 5, 1722, Easter Sunday, when Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen sighted a speck of green in the endless blue of the Pacific. He named it Paaseiland, Easter Island, never suspecting that he had stumbled upon one of Earth's most profound and ancient enigmas. Imagine that first moment, the creaking of the wooden ship, the whisper of wind in the sails, and then silence. Before them rose an island crowned with hundreds of statues, each one tall as a tower, each one staring not at the sea, but toward the island's heart, toward something unseen, something sacred. Roggeveen and his crew watched in disbelief. The Moai stood lined along the cliffs like sentinels frozen mid-breath, their faces smooth and solemn, their profiles marked by dignity. They seemed alive, not in motion, but in presence, as if they were watching the newcomers as intently as the newcomers watched them. The sailors had never seen anything like it. The figures appeared to rise directly from the earth, their long ears and heavy brows carved with impossible precision. How, they wondered, could such immense statues have been made by people who had no metal, no beasts of burden, no trees large enough to build the tools required? Raghaveen described the islanders as warm and peaceful, their canoes small but skillfully crafted, their dwellings built in long, curved shapes that mimicked the hulls of ships. They greeted the strangers with curiosity and led them to the fields of volcanic stone, where the statues had been born. But even then, mysteries abounded. The Moai stood in rows, most of them facing inland, their backs turned to the sea. Only a few looked outward, as if guarding the island from afar. Raghaveen's men counted dozens upon dozens of them, some upright, others fallen or half-buried in the earth. Many were crowned with red stone hats, massive cylinders carved from a different quarry entirely. To lift such weights in such an isolated place seemed beyond imagination. The explorers tried to measure, to map, to understand. They walked among the Moai, their shadows stretching long across the grass. They touched the cold stone faces and wondered if the figures represented kings, gods, or something else. Their journals spoke of awe, but also confusion. How could a civilization so remote, without ships to connect them to the world, create such monumental works of art and faith? In the years that followed, other expeditions arrived. Spanish, French, English. Each brought new questions and each left with more mystery. The reports varied. Some spoke of abundance, others of hardship, but all agreed on one thing: Easter Island was unlike any place on Earth. Later explorers described strange symbols, carved on wooden tablets, a writing system no one could read. They saw stone platforms aligned with stars, and caves that seemed to echo with ancient chants. Some whispered that the islanders had once known how to move the statues without wheels, without pulleys, as if by song, a rhythmic sacred dance that made the Moai walk. And then came the strangest observation of all. Among the island's inhabitants were those who claimed descent from long ears and short ears, two clans whose ancestors, they said, had built and watched over the statues in different ages. But when asked how the Moai had been raised, the answers turned to silence. The knowledge, it seemed, had vanished, or perhaps it was never meant to be shared. For the Europeans, Easter Island became a curiosity, a puzzle piece that didn't fit into the known world. For the Rapa Nui people, it was something else entirely, a place of memory, sacred beyond measure, where stone faces watched the living and the dead alike. As Raghaveen's ship sailed away, the statues returned to their quiet vigil. The sea swallowed the sound of oars, and the island once more became a world unto itself, a land of watchers, of mysteries, of echoes carved in stone. But what of those who built them? What story lay buried beneath the volcanic soil, beneath centuries of isolation and forgotten chants? Who were the people who once looked into the faces of these giants and saw reflections of their own souls? Long before European sails cut through the Pacific horizon, long before maps dared to name the island, there were the Rapa Nui, the first voyagers, navigators of stars and ocean currents, masters of winds and whispers who found a home on a speck of land in the middle of the world's greatest sea. No one knows precisely when they arrived. Some say around the 12th century, others believe much earlier, when Polynesian canoes still traced invisible highways between distant worlds. What is certain is this: they came from the vast blue, guided not by compasses or instruments, but by memory, rhythm, and the pulse of the ocean itself. The Rapa Nui called their island Te Pito o Te Henua, the navel of the world. To them it was not isolation but connection. Every wave, every gust of wind was a messenger, carrying news from unseen lands. Here, at the world's center, they built a civilization, as delicate as coral and as enduring as basalt. The land was fertile once, covered in palms, fruit trees, and birds of every kind. The Rapa Nui people planted gardens of stone, carefully arranged fields to hold the moisture of the rain, and carved irrigation channels into the slopes of volcanoes. Their villages were woven into the landscape, with the same reverence they gave to the sea. The island was ruled not by kings in the common sense, but by ariki, sacred chiefs believed to carry the mana, a divine energy that flowed through people, land, and gods alike. Every act, from carving a statue to planting a yam, was a ritual of connection. To live was to participate in a cosmic balance between sky and ocean, spirit and stone. At the heart of their culture stood the Moai, the stone ancestors. Each one bore the mana of a great leader, a guardian spirit meant to watch over the living. The Rapa Nui believed that when a person of great power died, their life force could be embodied in stone. Thus, each Moai was not just a statue, it was a vessel, a living memory anchored to the earth. Families and clans, known as mata, would commission Moai to honor their lineage. The larger the statue, the greater the mana it carried. Over time, the island became a vast open-air gallery of ancestral guardians, their stone gazes linking past, present, and future in a sacred continuum. But the Rapa Nui's genius went beyond the statues themselves. They developed a form of writing called Rongorongo, engraved in flowing symbols across wooden tablets. Even today, it remains undeciphered, a lost script that hums with the rhythm of chants long forgotten. Its lines resemble waves, birds, and spirals, echoes of the same geometry found in the Moai's silent symmetry. Through oral traditions, the people remembered Hotu Matue, the first king who brought their ancestors from a distant homeland, paradise across the sea. Some say it was a place called Hiva, now swallowed by the ocean depths. Others whisper that it was part of a greater world, perhaps the same lost civilization spoken of in tales of Lemuria, Mu, or even the lands of ancient Atlantis. The Rapa Nui sang their histories in chants called Rongoa, each verse carrying the story of birth, voyage, and belonging. Their dances mimicked the motion of waves and birds. Their tattoos mapped identity and ancestry across living skin. For them, art was not decoration. It was remembrance. They believed the island itself was alive. The volcanoes, Reno Raraku, Reno Kau, and Taravaka, were not mere mountains but the body of the world. The winds were its breath, the tides its heartbeat. Every stone, every shell, every Moai was part of one great being, the living island, the sacred womb of existence. To the outside world, EasterIsland seemed desolate, but to the Rapa Nui it was infinite, a reflection of the cosmos in miniature. They knew the stars not as distant suns, but as ancestors returning each night to guide their way. When they gazed upward, they saw home mirrored in the heavens. It was this harmony between earth, sky, and spirit that allowed them to achieve what seems impossible. They were not a lost people stranded on a rock. They were the keepers of a cosmic dialogue, children of the ocean and of stone, whose voices, though now faint, still echo through the gaze of every Moai. But harmony, even the most sacred, can shift with time. As centuries passed and generations changed, something began to stir within the island's quiet heart. A transformation not of faith but of balance. And so we must ask, what happens when the guardians of balance begin to rise in number? When stone and spirit compete for space beneath the same sky? The first rays of dawn painted the volcanic slopes of Reno Raraku in gold. Mist curled through the grass, and the faint sound of chisels, stone against stone, once echoed across the valley. Here, among the cliffs and the quiet winds, the people of Rapa Nui shaped the faces of eternity. This was the birthplace of the Moai, the quarry where giants slept half-carved in the mountain skin. Every groove, every line etched into the stone, was part of a sacred dialogue between earth and spirit. The Rapa Nui believed they were not merely crafting statues, They were awakening ancestors. The builders worked in teams belonging to great family lineages. Each family guarded its own techniques, methods passed down in chants and gestures rather than words. With basalt tools sharpened against the island's harder stones, they chipped away at the volcanic tuff, slowly revealing faces that seemed to emerge of their own accord from the living mountain. To create one moai could take years, even decades, but time meant little when you were carving memory itself. The process was a ritual, a meditation of faith and precision. No gesture was wasted, no line drawn by chance. The angles of the faces followed celestial patterns. Their noses pointed toward the rising sun. Their proportions aligned with sacred geometry. Triangles, circles, and spirals echoing the rhythm of creation. When a moai was complete, it was not left to sleep in the quarry. The builders would chant to awaken its spirit, then prepare for one of humanity's most astonishing feats: the transport. How, on an island with no beasts of burden, no wheels and few trees, did a people move statues weighing as much as 10 elephants? For centuries, scholars puzzled over this mystery. Some imagined rolling the moai on logs. Others suggested dragging them on sleds. Yet the Rapa Nui tell another story, that the statues walked. According to oral tradition, the moai moved upright, swaying from side to side like living beings. They were guided by song, rhythm, and prayer, a dance of faith that called upon mana, the life force of the ancestors. Teams of men would chant as they pulled on ropes, their movements synchronized with a ritual beat, their voices summoning energy from the very earth beneath their feet. Modern experiments have shown that with enough precision and unity, the statues can indeed be walked upright, rocked gently forward, step by step, as if gliding through time. Science now confirms what the Rapa Nui have always known. The moai were moved not just by skill, but by harmony, by rhythm and intention. Once a statue reached its destination, it was raised upon a platform called an ahu. These stone terraces, built with interlocking precision, served as both altars and foundations, the meeting place between heaven and earth. The moai stood atop them, gazing inward across the land, their backs to the ocean, their eyes fixed on the villages they would protect. When the coral eyes were placed into their sockets, it was said the moai came alive. In that moment, mana, the spiritual power of the ancestor, flowed through stone into the world of the living. Offerings were laid before them: sweet potatoes, fish, and feathers. Ceremonies of song and dance filled the night air, as the people celebrated the union of past and present. Every statue was unique, its features a portrait of the ancestor it represented. Some bore solemn, wise expressions. Others looked youthful, full of strength. A few were crowned with pukeo, cylindrical topknots, carved from red volcanic stone, symbols of sacred power. Even their placement followed invisible lines, spiritual pathways connecting family lands, sacred volcanoes, and the movements of the stars. The more moai a clan erected, the greater their prestige, the more their ancestors watched over the living. In time, the island became a vast constellation of stone beings, a map of memory visible from the sky itself. From afar, the moai appear still and silent, but to those who once built them they were anything but. They hummed with life, their presence a bridge between worlds. To carve, move, and raise a moai was to participate in creation itself, to shape matter with intention and belief. The islanders' harmony with their land was profound. They worked with stone, wind, and song, never against them. They saw no division between labor and ritual, between engineering and spirituality. Each hammer strike was both a prayer and a calculation, each statue a hymn written in stone. But as the moai multiplied, as generations added new faces to the island's horizon, a question began to echo through the chants of their builders. How many guardians can the land sustain before balance turns to burden? Night on Rapa Nui is unlike anywhere else on Earth. The stars hang close enough to touch, brighter than in any city, older than any map. And beneath that vast celestial ocean, the Moai stand like silhouettes of memory, their profiles lit by the glow of the moon. To the Rapa Nui this was not darkness. It was communion. Each statue, each carved face, was more than a monument, it was a living presence. The Moai were not gods, but ancestors returned, keepers of knowledge and guardians of harmony. Their eyes, once inlaid with coral and black obsidian, were said to see beyond sight. They watched over the people, blessing crops, guiding the seasons, and ensuring that the flow of mana, the sacred life force, remained unbroken. When the wind moved through the island's tall grass, it was said to carry whispers from the ancestors. When the ocean waves crashed against the cliffs, it was their laughter, their song, a reminder that no soul ever truly disappeared. It only changed form. The Rapa Nui saw existence as a circle, birth, death, and return, a never-ending exchange between the living and the unseen. To build a moai was to ensure that this circle remained whole. Through the statue, the ancestor continued to live, not as memory alone, but as a tangible guardian standing under the same sky they once walked beneath. Ceremonies called umu were held before the moai, where offerings of food were placed upon heated stones. The scent of roasted taro, sweet potato, and fish rose with the smoke, a fragrant bridge between worlds. Chants filled the air, each syllable a vibration of reverence. Children learned to bow their heads and listen to the rhythm of the island, the heartbeat of the ancestors still echoing beneath the soil. To the Rapa Nui, the spiritual and physical were never separate. The land itself held spirit. Mount Taravaka was the spine of a giant, Reno Kau its beating heart, and Reno Raraku the quarry its dreaming mind. The Moai, emerging from that mind of stone, were thoughts made manifest, dreams solidified into form, and in those dreams lay guidance. Each clan believed that the spirit of their ancestor, once embodied in stone, could protect the harvest, calm the seas, and bring prosperity to the people. The Moai were placed strategically along the island's edge, facing the villages, their gaze eternal, their backs turned to the ocean, for their duty was to look inward, to watch over the descendants of those who gave them life. In the fading light of evening, the priests, the Tangata Rongorongo, would gather near the great ahu platforms. They would speak to the statues as one speaks to elders. They did not ask for miracles. They sought balance. Their prayers were not for power, but for harmony between the human and the divine. Among the most sacred rituals was the belief that each moai carried a soul spark. When a new statue was raised, its eyes would remain empty until the day of activation. Only when the coral eyes were inserted did the statue awaken, its mana released. Witnesses spoke of feeling the ground hum, as if the very island inhaled the spirit of its past. These were moments of deep stillness, the kind of silence that is alive with meaning. Under the vast Pacific sky, families would gather around the newly raised guardian, singing songs that told of lineage, of the sea voyage, of the first canoe that touched these shores. Children would look up at the moai's calm expression and see not stone but kin, a grandfather, a matriarch, a protector. Every part of the ritual reflected a truth the Rapa Nui held dear, that life continues through remembrance, and that what we honor never dies. The moai were not built to be feared or worshipped, but to remind the people who they were, where they came from, and where they would return. Even today, as the wind brushes through the grasslands, and the ocean murmurs against the cliffs, one can almost feel that presence, as if the moai are still dreaming, their thoughts blending with the clouds, their memory woven into every breath of wind. But as generations passed, as more statues rose across the island's slopes, the balance between creation and sustenance began to tremble. The people who gave life to stone were slowly facing a question of their own. If the moai were the protectors of life, who would protect the land that gave them birth? Walk across Rapa Nui at sunrise, and you'll notice something subtle but astonishing. Hundreds of colossal stone faces stand with their backs to the sea. Their gaze is fixed inland, toward the villages, the hills, the cradle of life itself. To any traveler, this might seem strange. Should not the island's guardians face the ocean, warding off the unknown, watching for whatever might come from beyond the horizon? But the Moai do not look outward. They look homeward. To understand this, we must think as the Rapa Nui once did, not in terms of defense but of connection. For them, the sea was not a boundary. It was a bridge. It was the path their ancestors once traveled to reach this sacred place, and it was the mirror through which spirits returned to the stars. The danger was never from the ocean. It was from within, from the loss of memory, from imbalance between people and the land. Thus, the Moai face inward to watch over life itself. Each statue stands guard over a village, its invisible gaze extending protection, wisdom, and calm. They are watchers of the hearth, not the horizon. They remind the living that the true threats are not storms or strangers, but forgetting who you are. The symbolism is profound. The Moai embody a sacred unity between the earth that gave them form, the ancestors who inspired their creation, and the generations yet to come. Their placement across the island forms an invisible web, a network of ancestral energy linking every family, every field, every ritual space into one living organism. In this way, Rapa Nui itself becomes a single vast temple, and the Moai its pillars of consciousness. When viewed from above, the Ahu platforms upon which they stand form alignments, not random but celestial. Some face sunrise at solstice, others trace lines with the moon's seasonal cycles. Their arrangement suggests a deep understanding of the sky, as if the island's people built not only monuments to their dead, but calendars for their descendants. Archaeologists mapping these alignments found patterns that echo across Polynesia, from the petroglyphs of Hawaii to the stone Mary of Tahiti. Each alignment seemed to whisper a single truth, that humanity once saw the cosmos as home, not as something separate. The Moai, then, were not merely guardians. They were translators between realms, between human rhythm and the rhythm of stars. And perhaps that is why they face inward, because true power, true guidance, does not come from looking outward into chaos, but from turning inward toward origin, toward meaning. The Moai remind us that civilization's strength is not in expansion, but in reflection. Standing before them, you can feel it. The silence is not empty. It hums. It's as though the Moai are aware of your presence, as though they are remembering you as much as you are remembering them. Each carved face carries the same calm expression, a serenity born from centuries of watching life unfold. When storms sweep across the island, when waves crash against the cliffs, the Moai do not waver. They have seen everything: birth, harvest, loss, renewal, and still they stand, unblinking. Their gaze is a mirror. Look long enough and you begin to see not stone, but yourself, a reflection of the same ancient longing. To endure, to belong, to leave a mark that time cannot erase. It is said that when the ancestors first taught the art of carving, they instructed, "Let the stone look to the land, for the land is our mother, and the land must see itself." And so, each Moai gazes across its own people, its own fields, each a testament to the truth that life's essence is not found in what lies beyond the sea, but in what blooms beneath one's feet. Yet, as centuries passed, and as more Moai rose along the coasts, the harmony between spirit and land began to shift. The island that had once sung with abundance grew quieter, more burdened, as if the guardian's silent gaze were warning of something unseen. For even the most sacred balance can tremble, and even the wisest guardians cannot hold back change forever. What secret was hidden in their stillness? Did the inward gaze of the Moai foretell not just protection, but prophecy? Across the windswept plains of Rapa Nui, beneath the silent watch of the Moai, lie clues not just of devotion but of knowledge. Patterns carved in stone, symbols etched into tablets, and alignments written in the geometry of stars. To walk the island is to wander through a library without books. Cathedral built not with words but with meaning. Many travelers have marveled at the Moai's beauty, but few have looked close enough to see the language hidden beneath their calm. Every line, every proportion, every direction carries purpose. Their faces, for instance, elongated, serene, timeless, mirror the constellations overhead. The slope of their noses echoes the angle of Orion's belt at the solstice. Their shadows fall precisely where the sun sets on the longest day of the year. Coincidence or design? Modern archaeologists have measured, mapped, and modeled the Moai, finding that their spacing across the island forms patterns that seem almost mathematical. Many stand along invisible lines connecting sacred volcanic craters, freshwater springs, and celestial rising points. It is as if the builders used the island itself as a cosmic instrument, tuning it to the heartbeat of the heavens. But the stones were only one part of the code. The Rapa Nui also left behind something smaller, more fragile. The mysterious wooden tablets known as Rongorongo, covered in flowing, bird-like glyphs. They are among the world's great undeciphered scripts. Some lines run left to right, others right to left, curling and turning in a rhythm that feels almost musical. Each sign seems to move, to dance, as though meant to be sung, not read. What do they say? No one knows for certain, but the island's oral traditions hint that these symbols carried not mere stories but formulas, records of lunar cycles, planting seasons, and ancestral lines. To read them was to understand time itself. Some researchers have suggested that Rongorongo may encode astronomical knowledge as precise as that of ancient Egypt or the Maya. Others see in it a philosophy, a visual poetry describing the interdependence of all life. One glyph resembles the outline of a fish, another a spiral, another a bird in flight. Together they form patterns that echo the carvings found on stones near the Moai platforms. Across Polynesia, similar symbols appear, in Hawaii, Samoa, and Tahiti, as if they were fragments of a single ocean-spanning script. Could it be that Rapa Nui preserved the last traces of a knowledge shared by seafarers who mapped the stars long before the modern world began? When the first explorers collected the tablets, they did not realize what they were taking. Many were burned or lost, others kept in distant museums, far from the winds that once gave them voice. Yet even in silence, Rongorongo endures. Its presence whispers of an era when writing, architecture, and astronomy were not separate arts but one language of harmony. And then there are the petroglyphs, spirals, waves, turtles, and birdmen carved into the rocks near Orongo crater. These are more than decoration. They are records of a sacred ceremony. The Tangata Manu, the birdmen ritual that marked the turning of seasons, and the renewal of power among the island's clans. It symbolized flight, transformation, and connection to the divine. The bird was not merely an animal. It was a messenger between worlds, a reminder that even stone must remember how to rise. Some scholars now believe that the birdmen cult was not a break from the age of the Moai, but its continuation, a new expression of the same search for balance between heaven and earth, human and ancestor, visible and invisible. When we look at these carvings and tablets, we glimpse not superstition but science, a science wrapped in myth, a wisdom woven into art. The Rapa Nui did not separate faith from knowledge. For them, understanding the stars was an act of reverence. Measuring the seasons was a form of prayer. To this day, no one has fully decoded their system. But perhaps the key is not in the symbols themselves, but in the way the people who made them perceived the world. To them, all things, stone, bird, sea, star, were part of one vast conversation. They did not build monuments to escape the world, but to speak with it. And maybe, when we look upon the Moai and the spirals and the glyphs, we are seeing the remnants of a wisdom that understood not how to dominate nature, but how to listen to it. If this is true, if the Moai are not merely statues, but notes in a forgotten symphony. Then what was the melody they were meant to preserve? Was it a map, a message, or a warning, left for those who would come long after? The mystery of Easter Island does not end at its shores. It ripples outward across the Pacific, carried by the same winds and currents that once brought the first voyagers here. For the story of Rapa Nui, it seems, is not a solitary legend but a single verse in humanity's oldest song, a song of creation, migration, and remembrance. When scholars traced the DNA of the Rapa Nui people, they found threads woven not only from Polynesia, but faint echoes reaching toward South America. Sweet potatoes native to the Andes were found growing on Easter Island long before European contact. How did they cross thousands of miles of open ocean? Coincidence? Drift? Or the deliberate voyage of explorers who knew the sea as intimately as we know our streets? The Polynesians were among history's greatest navigators. Using only the stars, ocean swells, and the flight of birds, they mapped the Pacific with astonishing precision. To them, the ocean was not empty space. It was a living network, its waves carrying stories between islands like veins of the world. Easter Island was one of the farthest points of that great web, a sacred node connecting both the seen and unseen worlds. But what if the connections ran deeper still? Across oceans, continents, and time, we find monuments that speak the same silent language as the Moai. Stone faces with serene expressions, colossal blocks fitted with geometric perfection, temples aligned to stars and solstices. From the pyramids of Egypt to the statues of Tiwanaku, from the megaliths of Micronesia to the Moai of Rapa Nui, a pattern hums beneath the surface. Some researchers have noticed the uncanny resemblances between Easter Island stonework and that of Peru's Lake Titicaca region. Both feature smooth, interlocking stones and platforms aligned with celestial events. In the Andes, legends tell of Viracocha, a bearded deity who arrived from across the sea, teaching architecture, astronomy, and moral law. He was said to have walked with giants and left faces of stone. And on Rapa Nui, the ancestors spoke of Hotu Matue, a king who came from a land now lost beneath the waves, a land that some have compared to Mu, the mythical continent said to have vanished in the Pacific ages ago. Is it possible that these are fragments of the same story, told in different tongues, echoes of a civilization so ancient that even memory has turned it into myth? Could there once have been a network of seafarers who carried sacred knowledge from one shore to another, building monuments not for conquest, but to anchor wisdom in the world itself? The evidence, though elusive, continues to whisper. Stone tools found on the coast of Chile bear striking resemblance to those used on Rapa Nui. Genetic markers in Polynesian chickens appear in pre-Columbian South America, and the word for sweet potato, camara in Polynesia, cumul in Quechua, is nearly identical on both sides of the ocean. Coincidence or memory? Perhaps the Rapa Nui were not the end of a migration, but the guardians of a crossroads. They preserved the ancient patterns of geometry, the reverence for stars, the understanding that stone can remember, and in doing so, they became the final storytellers of a forgotten age. Even across the Indian Ocean, in the ruins of Asia and Africa, we find echoes of similar proportions, similar beliefs about ancestors returning as guardians of stone. It's as if, long before recorded history, humanity once shared a single vision of harmony, a vision that later fractured into myths scattered across the world. Easter Island may then be more than a mystery. It may be a key, a remnant of the first civilization that sought not power, but equilibrium between heaven, earth, and sea. The Moai, those timeless watchers, may represent the same aspiration that shaped the pyramids, the ziggurats, and the temples of forgotten lands, the desire to leave behind a bridge between human time and cosmic eternity. And if the same principles appear from Egypt to Peru, from Polynesia to Mesopotamia, then perhaps the ancients were not as divided as we imagine. Perhaps the ocean was never a barrier, only a mirror reflecting our shared beginnings. Still, one question lingers like the shadow of a cloud over the Pacific. If the knowledge that linked these civilizations once existed, what happened to it? Was it lost to time or hidden, waiting for the right moment to be understood again? When the sun rises over Rapa Nui, its light touches the faces of the Moai one by one, a slow awakening, as though the island itself breathes with them. But beneath that tranquil beauty lies a story, not of collapse or tragedy, as often told by outsiders, but of balance lost and slowly remembered. Easter Island, in truth, is not a warning of failure. It is a mirror for the choices all civilizations must one day face. Long ago, the Rapa Nui lived in deep rhythm with their world. Their fields were gardens of ingenuity, stones arranged to capture dew, walls built to protect crops from the wind, soil enriched by volcanic ash and the gifts of the sea. Every act of cultivation was also a prayer, an acknowledgement that life is a partnership between human and nature. Even the act of carving the Moai was done with respect, returning broken stone to the land so it might one day live again. But balance is a fragile inheritance. As centuries passed and generations grew, so too did ambition, more Moai, more platforms, more symbols of devotion carved into the heart of the mountain. The forest that once cloaked the island began to thin. Trees used to roll the statues and build canoes disappeared from the hills. The sea, once easily reached, became harder to touch. It was not greed that caused it, but love for ancestors, love for faith, love for perfection in the eyes of the gods. Yet even love, unmeasured, can tip the scales. As the land changed, so did the way of life. The people turned inward, seeking harmony once more. They shifted from carving stone to carving symbols, from raising statues to raising understanding. New traditions arose, the Birdman ceremony, the honoring of rebirth and renewal, reminding them that power was not ownership but balance restored. The old Moai remained, still gazing over the island, not as relics of loss, but as reminders of the cost of forgetting equilibrium. Today, scientists see Easter Island as an ecological puzzle, a closed system that reflects our planet itself, a microcosm of humanity's relationship with the Earth. What the Rapa Nui learned, the world now confronts on a global scale: how to live with reverence for the soil that feeds us, for the seas that cradle our origins, for the unseen balance that holds life together. Yet when one stands among the Moai, there is no sense of ruin. There is peace. The grass sways in the wind, the ocean hums its eternal song, and the statues, unbroken, unbowed, continue their watch. Perhaps the Rapa Nui never lost their way. Perhaps they simply evolved, trading stone for spirit, visibility for memory. Modern descendants of the island's first settlers still speak of their ancestors with reverence. They do not see the Moai as fallen idols, but as living family. Their silence, a conversation too deep for words. Each restoration, each ritual dance, each whisper of prayer in the wind, is part of the same promise their forebears made. To remember, if we listen, the island speaks. It reminds us that progress without reflection becomes emptiness, and that reverence without understanding becomes repetition. It teaches that wisdom is not found in the endless creation of monuments, but in knowing when to let the land rest, when to build less and see more. Rapa Nui, the navel of the world, is not merely a dot of stone and grass upon the sea. It is a living parable, a story written in rock, sky, and memory. And in its stillness, it tells us something the modern world has nearly forgotten: that the earth is not our possession. It is our partner, our teacher, our mirror. So perhaps the lesson of the island is not a warning, but an invitation to remember that creation and care are the same act, that growth without gratitude is hollow, and that what we build in stone must always reflect what we nurture in spirit. Yet, one question remains, lingering softly beneath the surf and wind. Did the people of Rapa Nui learn this lesson before the world forgot it? Or are their statues still waiting for us to understand? The wind moves softly across Rapa Nui's hills. It carries the scent of salt and earth, the same breath that brushed the island. When the first stone was carved from the mountain's skin, the Moai stand motionless, yet alive, their shadows long and patient beneath the morning light. For centuries we have asked the same question: who built them and why? Archaeology offers one truth. The Rapa Nui people, descendants of Polynesian navigators, raised these statues in devotion to their ancestors. They did it through skill, community, and faith. No machines, no miracles, only the rhythm of human harmony. But beneath that truth, another layer hums quietly, a deeper mystery older than history, suggesting that the builders were not only human hands, but human hearts guided by something greater. Look closely at the Moai. Their design is universal: serene faces, elongated forms, eyes that once gleamed with coral light. This imagery echoes through civilizations separated by oceans and time. The gods of the Andes, the stone watchers of ancient Peru, the colossal faces of Tiwanaku, and the serene guardians of Angkor, all seem carved from a single dream. How could so many cultures share the same vision? Were they inspired by similar needs? To honor their ancestors, to reach the heavens, or by a memory carried within humanity itself? Some believe the Rapa Nui were heirs to knowledge from Mu, the mythical Pacific civilization said to have vanished beneath the waves. According to that legend, when Mu fell, its wisdom dispersed across the earth like seeds, to Egypt, to Mesoamerica, to Polynesia. Each culture nurtured fragments of the same sacred geometry, the same reverence for balance, the same understanding that stone could speak, the language of eternity. The Moai, then, may not only represent the ancestors of Rapa Nui, but humanity's collective longing to endure, to leave behind a mark that would outlast storm, fire, and time. They are proof that art can be prayer, and that the act of creation can become an act of remembrance. In their gaze, something profound is reflected: the human desire to connect with the infinite. Each Moai, standing silently under the stars, reminds us that existence is both fleeting and eternal, that we are born of the same earth we shape, and that in shaping it we reveal who we are. Modern science has explained the tools, the methods, even the physics of how the Moai were raised. But there remains a mystery that no measurement can resolve. Why, across thousands of years and miles, humans have always sought to turn stone into spirit, matter into meaning. Perhaps that is the true genius of Rapa Nui. Not the carving nor the engineering, but the understanding that remembrance itself is a sacred act, that the builder's purpose was not power, but continuity. Each Moai is a prayer made visible, a declaration that the bond between generations can transcend even death. Today, as the world faces its own trials, of memory, of meaning, of balance, EasterIsland speaks softly through its monuments. It reminds us that civilizations rise not by force, but by reverence, that the truest monuments are not those that defy nature, but those that exist in harmony with it. Stand before a Moai at dusk, when the sky blushes gold and violet. You will feel the air thicken with silence, a silence not of emptiness, but of presence. It is as if the ancestors themselves are breathing through the stone, watching still, waiting still, not for worship but for understanding. Who built the Moai? The answer lies not only in the quarry or the chisel, but in the human soul, in that ancient impulse to remember, to honor, to touch the eternal through creation. They were built by hands, yes, but guided by something timeless, something that still whispers in the wind across the island. We are the memory of the earth. We stand so you may not forget. And so the question endures, rising above the waves. Are the Moai the memory of a vanished world? Or are they mirrors showing us what it means to be human? The answer, perhaps, is both. And as long as they stand, the question itself becomes the gift, a reminder that to seek meaning, to carve wonder from silence, is the oldest and most sacred act of all.